Hello everyone. Let's start our new chapter of second book, that is chapter number 5, Through the Eyes of the Travelers. In this chapter, we will be talking about the various travelers and what they have mentioned in their travelogues in their written accounts. So, as you all know, we all love to travel. And when we travel a particular place, we actually try to find out something about that place first, and then we go to that place and analyze all the things that we have studied earlier or we have watched on internet earlier. Now, women and men both have traveled in search of work from one place to another, or from rural areas to cities or to towns, and they have escaped from natural disasters as traders, merchants, soldiers, even priests, pilgrims, or they have been driven by a sense of adventure. Whenever we are traveling, we have a sense of adventure within us when we travel over mountains or over exotic places. Now, try to understand it in this way that whenever you happen to travel new places, you find everything different there. You want time to understand the things there. So, obviously, those who visited or came to stay in a new land, they actually encountered a world that was different in terms of landscape or physical environment, as well as customs and traditions were different languages were spoken at different places, different beliefs were there, and also the practices of people were different. So many of them actually tried to adapt to these differences, and others, somewhat exceptionally, they actually noted carefully in accounts, generally recording what they find unusual or remarkable. So what happened was that some of the people tried to adapt to the new surroundings, to the new differences, and also some of them tried to note down all the things that they found unusual and that they found different from their own area. Now, unfortunately, we have practically no accounts of travel left by women, though we know that they traveled. But unfortunately, we don't find any accounts that were being written by women, despite of the fact that we know that women were also travelers. Women used to travel sometimes alone and sometimes with their families as well. Now, if you see figure 5.1a, this shows palm leaves. Now, the accounts that have actually survived and tell us a lot about the different places are often varied in terms of their subject matter. So, somebody has written about the physical environment, somebody has in their accounts written about the culture and traditions. So, we have different subject matter of different that is being mentioned in the different accounts. So some deal with affairs of the court, some tells us about the political situation, some tell us about the cultural situation, and some even tell us about the economic situations. Many of the accounts are also focused on religious issues or on architectural features and monuments. For example, if we talk about one of the very important descriptions of the city of Vijayanagar that we'll be studying in chapter 7 in the 15th century was found from Abdul Razak Samarkandi, that was a diplomat who came visiting from Herat. Now, in few cases, if we talk about, the different travelers did not go to distant lands. For example, in the Mughal Empire that we'll be studying about in the chapter 8 and 9, administrators of the Mughal Empire sometimes traveled within the empire and recorded their observations. So it was not necessary that the accounts that we have found out of the travelers have traveled distant lands. Some of them traveled within the empire and recorded their observations. So some of them were also interested in looking at a popular customs, folklore and traditions of their own land, despite of going to far away lands. Rather, they wished to stay in their own place and visited nearby areas and wrote in detail about the popular traditions, folklore and customs, etc. Now, in this chapter, basically, we will be seeing how our knowledge of the past can be enriched through a consideration of descriptions of the social life that has been provided to us by the travelers who had actually visited the subcontinent. We'll be focusing on the accounts of three men, that is, Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni was the person who came from Uzbekistan in the 11th century. Then, after that, we'll be talking about Ibn Battuta, who came from Morocco in the 14th century. And after that, lastly, we'll be talking about the Frenchman Francois Bernier, who came in the 17th century. Now, if you see the figure carefully, that is 5.1b, this shows a coconut. The coconut and the pan that was shown in figure 5.1a were things that actually struck many travelers as unusual. Now, as these authors came from vastly different social and cultural environments, that is Ibn Battuta and Al-Biruni, and lastly Francois Bernier, they came from different social and cultural environments. They were often more attentive to everyday activities that were happening in the areas. And they also noticed carefully the practices which were taken for granted by the indigenous writers, for whom these were routine matters. For the indigenous writers, or for the people who were not traveling to far or distant lands for writing, the local writers or the indigenous writers ignored the routine matters which were very important and interesting for the authors who came from different distant lands. So these routine matters were not worthy for them for being recorded, as for them they were happening daily and there was nothing new in them. Now, it is this difference in perspective that makes the accounts of travelers very much interesting. So, who these travelers write for, or what were their perspective? We'll be learning about all these answers that may vary from one instance or from one example to the next. We'll be talking about these three important people in this chapter, and we'll be answering a lot of questions that come to our mind when we are studying about these authors in the next coming up videos. So children, today in the video we talked about the introduction of the chapter, that is through the eyes of the travelers. We talked about that in this chapter we'll be talking about different travelers who visited different areas that were different from the area from where they came from. There were differences in culture, physical environment, religious and traditions. Practices of the people were different, but still they came from faraway lands to know and write about the places they found interesting. And we'll also be talking about the difference in the travel accounts of the authors who came from faraway lands and of the authors who were indigenous writers. So children, that's all for today. We'll come back again with the next video with the next topic. Till then, thank you so much.